Welcome to the Barker Podcast Collection.
I suck, you suck, I suck at Call of Duty. You suck. You suck. You suck.
Welcome to the Not Playing Podcast. My name's Rob Howard, and this week I'm joined by
Iain Bruce
and Marcus Hurley.
We're also joined by
Will. Hello, I'm Will. Nice to meet you.
Basically, last time we were all together, well, Iain wasn't around last time, but he's joining us on this occasion for us to continue our conversation about RPGs. And we kind of left it at the point where we were kind of just trying to figure out what actually is an RPG, as in so many games these days are kind of RPGs in a way. So yeah, I mean, let's get the ball rolling. I mean, let's just say, I don't know, where do we start with this?
So ask this question yourselves.
Rocket-propelled grenade. Well,
Thanks, Marcus.
Not that
All right, thanks
kind of
everyone. Cheers.
I'd ask this question to yourselves. What was the original RPG before computer games? I would put it back to Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
Well, yep, certainly.
was that before
and I
or
still
after
to this
those
day play.
turn-based books?
Oh,
I would suggest the Steve Jackson books, maybe.
was that around
before
before
that,
Dungeons
it was-
and Dragons? Ooh,
It was after it. It was definitely after it.
yeah, fighting fantasy.
Yeah.
That's
Yep. It was Tunnels and Trolls was the precursor to D&D. That's the proper old school one, which came out in 1975. And then Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, no, what am I talking about?
well, good thing
I
you're
think they
clearly
both came
not
out,
reading from the internet.
No, it was Chainmail. I know Tunnels and
Jesus,
Trolls was one of the
spoilers.
original
Christ.
ones. But yeah, that was 71. And then that was more of like a war game. And then it was in 74 that the first version of Dungeons and Dragons came out. So yeah, so I guess yeah,
Could
RPGs. Go on.
could I suggest that perhaps Monopoly is an RPG?
It is.
That's a bit reaching. What?
And that came out in 1903. So I think that might win.
This is when we have to go back to what is the definition of an RPG. So I would argue,
Yeah.
based on the sort of Dungeons and Dragons, you've got a main overarching storyline. You have
Yep.
characters who should be free to make their own decisions and approach things their own way, and who also can grow as you play. I would suggest that
Absolutely.
Mr. Top Hat or the Little Metal Dog may or may not qualify.
Yeah, that was kind of straight where I went when you mentioned Monopoly. Was like yes to get into the character of a top hat.
No, but yeah.
But there is growth, financial growth.
I
think that's where we would differ
Hotel
because-
Plus 2.
Isn't an RPG something that lets you play something that you're normally not?
That's true, but then doesn't that make Uncharted an RPG?
Or any game. Super Bomberman.
Yeah,
Well, this is it.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
This is where it gets challenging. I would actually argue an awful lot of games describe themselves as RPGs when maybe they are or they aren't. But even if you look at some of the JRPGs, which, from the Final Fantasy side, you've got multiple characters, but they're fixed characters. It's not like Dungeons and Dragons where you were just able to say, I'm going to be a 7-foot-tall Amazonian Valkyrie fighter, and this is me, and I'll invent everything about it. That was one side of the RPGs. But if you go to the Final Fantasy side, no, you have a character, you have a face, you have a name, you have a small party, but you are assigned those roles. But it still qualifies as an RPG.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
I mean,
Perhaps we should Google it.
What is it? No.
what the
let's
definition?
Not.
The definition of a role-playing game.
Well, going
Yeah.
by Technopedia, a role-playing game, RPG, is a genre of video game where the gamer controls a fictional character or characters that undertakes a quest in an imaginary world. Defining RPGs is very challenging due to the range of hybrid genres that have RPG elements. So traditional role-playing video games shared three basic elements, and maybe this is our point of judgment, and I'm not even certain I agree with these. So levels or character statistics that could be improved over the course of the game. which takes out
Yeah.
Monopoly and arguably takes out, for example, Uncharted.
Yeah.
You could say the money is in Monopoly. I'm just being devil's advocate.
A menu-based combat system.
I have frequently thrown things at someone in Monopoly.
Well, certainly rules out
Menu.
Skyrim, for example, though. And a central quest that runs through the game as a storyline. But the trouble is...
So
go on.
I have been replaying Skyrim recently because it is a beautiful game if you just get lost in it.
You can just play
I
a
think.
role, you just wander, decide who you are. You don't even need
Absolutely,
that quest.
But the menu-based combat system, especially I've got to the dragon bit in the weird tentacly area. Wow, that's my descriptive powers tested. And
Did I do that?
I definitely spend a lot of time in combat in the menu, usually drinking potions or swapping weapons and stuff. So you could argue it's menu-based combat.
You could, and in fact, if you
Certainly.
look at
It's a stretch.
Fallout from the same software house with the VAT system certainly qualifies on that side.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Skyrim's definitely got a lot of menus, like a lot of lists of stuff.
I'm fairly sure that's not what it means, but...
But in combat in Skyrim, I would just basically just summon something and then kind of bod around and wait for opportune moments to actually do something myself. But that's how I played it.
Here's a controversial statement. Let's see if you guys agree or disagree. If you don't have an inventory system, if you can't decide what it is you're carrying and equipping, it ain't an RPG.
I
If you
think
can't
that's
choose
true.
your weapons, choose your armour, choose your setup. Can you think of any exceptions?
I'm trying to think now. Yeah, I mean, even Grand Theft Auto's got it doesn't have an inventory as
Gauntlet.
such, but it's got weapon slots.
Ooh, but I would put Gauntlet down purely as an action game. I wouldn't call it an RPG.
Yeah.
But you do quest. And
So
it does mask using RPG elements, as in mask behind fantasy and everything else. But that's an example of what you were saying. There's no inventory, there's no equipment, there's no... But yet, on the cover of it, it looks like it should be an RPG.
Are we talking old school ZX Spectrum Gauntlet or new PlayStation
Either,
Gauntlet?
to be honest, all versions of it. I suppose the latest one, maybe there is a little bit of an inventory and some
I
swapping.
think it did have.
But that's because
I
of the
think it had
influence.
some upgrade stuff.
But that's
Well, yeah,
because
I mean,
of the influence
arguably-
of RPG elements.
Yeah, in the new one, absolutely, because you did level up as you got more experienced. You could choose new skills and that sort of thing, which is a bit closer.
Yeah.
But I would certainly say on the ZX Spectrum one, no, you were just a
Yeah,
little person that shot stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the answer to that question may come back to your what you said earlier, Will, where things say they're an RPG when they just have a tiny little bit of it. In the same way that most games these days will say they're open world. No. Like Far Cry 3, open world, is it? Well, kind of. But there's stuff like... Well, mine's completely gone blank. But there was a game I played recently that it was, and it's open world and stuff. It might have been Horizon Zero Dawn even.
Ooh,
It's kind of open world.
I mean, that's a good example. Is that an RPG, though?
I think it's the current definition of an RPG.
Ooh, are we
because there's some
diluting
bits
it?
you can do. Well, I don't think we are, but I think the industry is diluting
Sorry, we
it at
as
the
the,
moment.
as the human race.
Yes, we as the consumers who buy this crap,
Yeah.
we are letting it become. It's like movies; they haven't even been released, or on the day of release, they will be called the new classic from whoever is out. It's not a classic after one day. Stop using that term, please.
Yeah.
That might
Yeah.
just be me.
See, the thing is, I think that I think there's become kind of a sub-genre of RPG that's also kind of grown out of the MMOs, which is like the survival genre. And I think that's kind of what Horizon Zero Dawn is more like.
He's going
Like,
for a
in the
piss.
same way, in the same way that Far Cry is you could say that's got RPG elements, but it actually goes down the survival route where, you know, you're kind of you kind of have an inventory, but it's more like slots, like in an FPS, but you are actually improving. Like there's a lot of crafting in it,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of the survival way of doing it. Is to everything is that you're crafting. And so I'd say if Horizon is an RPG, it's an RPG because you're playing the role of Sprocket or whatever her name is.
Aloy.
Sprocket.
Aloy, that's it. Yeah, I knew it was something like that.
Sprocket and Cubs.
Yeah, and that's kind of where it ends, really, because it's just a crafting game in an open world. It's like open world crafting game with big dinosaurs.
But that's the thing. Was crafting ever something as part of an RPG in the traditional sense, or is it something that people have thought this is a way to expand? Whereas before you would find weapons in chests and
isn't it
and
just
go
a way
on
to kill
quests
time?
to find. Now it's you find the elements that you put together to create these items. It's just another way of expanding, like you said, the gameplay.
But isn't it just a way of filling game time?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like your game
you
might be a 5-hour game, but with crafting,
yeah, but you can
it's
say
a
it's
50-hour
40.
game. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the classic Ubisoft
Wow.
collectathon approach.
Yep.
Ugh.
Completionist.
Yeah,
I
I have to say, go on.
I have to admit to having platinumed Far Cry's 3 and 4, and the grinding necessary is unbelievable. But if you take Far Cry as an example, you have an inventory, you have levelling up, and you get to decide how your character will progress. And yet, I cannot bring myself to call it an RPG. You have health potions, you can decide how you play, you can decide whether you're going to be stealthy. It's got an overarching main quest, it's got side quests, and yet, to me, it's an FPS. It has RPG elements, but I could never categorise. If someone said, what's your favourite RPGs? Even if I loved Far Cry, and I like it, I could never say, oh, yeah, Far Cry, great RPG.
Yeah. What about?
I'd say it's an action game. It's a sandbox action game because they put you in an area. They say it's open world, but it's within certain walls. You know, it's not like Sim City or Sim Earth or whatever, where you can hop on a plane and bugger off somewhere else and stuff. But they just made the sandbox bigger.
Maybe dialogue's a thing as well. Maybe saying, interacting with a character and deciding how you'll behave with them. In Far Cry, you go to a person, you hit talk. They say a thing, you might say something back. You don't get a say in what it is.
But then games that were traditionally RPGs, like, I don't know, God knows, a lot of the old, say, JRPGs or anything else like that, all the characters have set dialogues. Some of them, you had to speak to them 4 times, and then they say the thing, which is like a trope and a joke used in many other things. Yeah. But, you know, speak to the man in the market 15 times and he will tell you what a shiny coin is. You know, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So by trying to dissect
it,
but by trying to dissect it too far.
Yeah, but if you go back to the dungeon, you go back to the Western RPGs, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, going down that direction, even reaching back, I'm trying to think of some of the older ones, but all around those ones, your classic isometric team-based RPGs, those ones all had masses of dialogue, more than you get in most modern games, because they don't need to voice act it all.
Yeah, I'm playing Torment at the moment, and my God, is it wordy. I mean, I've never read so much off a screen in my life, but to be honest, it starts off that way, but it kind of picks up, and I'm loving it because they can do so much more with the written word than they can with, you know, very costly CGI cutscenes and stuff.
I agree.
And at the time, you know, after Mass Effect got such a poor reception, I was like, I was so in the mood for an RPG, and this has really ticked a lot of the boxes, to be honest. Despite having Prey sitting there looking at me, I've kind of decided I'm really going to try and press on with Torment and try and finish it. And I'm getting there, I think. But yeah, I've done 30 hours in it so far, and I think I'm at the final act.
Wow.
But how much of that was spent crafting?
None at all.
Good. Okay.
Wow.
In fact, you get so many items in that which are referred to as oddities, that some of which have do something, and some of which just are there to be sold, you know. But the descriptions of everything is so dense, and it's such a weird world as well. I mean, that's something as well, isn't it? It's the setup, the kind of the actual nature of the sandbox itself, and yeah, that's a thing for RPGs, because so many, I think, people kind of think of like the generic fantasy trappings as kind of that's what an RPG is.
It's that or space.
Yeah, you can go the other way.
It's dragons or spaceships.
Yeah, that's EA have got both bases covered. Well,
what about Vampire the Masquerade?
That's definitely an RPG.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. I mean, I played both of them games. The first one was more like it was a party based thing, but it was actually well ahead of its time because it had all like the DM component that was in Neverwinter Nights. If you could be asked to deal with it, I don't think it was quite as user friendly, but it was also it was a full 3D engine, and it was like a party based game, which took place across a huge expanse of time. It starts off in like the Dark Ages and then goes all the way through to modern day. Admittedly, it lost its way a little bit towards the end, but then so did the other vampire game. I just really appreciate the ambition of both of those games, and Bloodlines especially, which was actually the first game to ever make use of the Source engine. And yeah, I mean, it was great. I'd say probably the first half of the game is great, and then it kind of turns into a bit of a murder fest as you get towards the end.
That's called the final act, mate.
But it's telling because you could go into third person in that game, and basically I played the first half of the game purely in first person, absolutely lapping up all the scenery and characters and dialogue. And the dialogue, by the way, changed dramatically depending on what cast of vampire you were playing, and that's how the game started. But at the end, I was just running around with a fucking axe, just hacking the shit out of things in third person.
I'm not sure that's the game's fault, mate. That's you in nearly every game, isn't it?
Well, I mean,
that's your default in the final act.
That was I remember you talking about Fallout 4, and that was how you ended up, wasn't it? You were just running around with Grognak's axe.
No, I just went full power armor and ended up going against the Brotherhood in the end. And so basically took the ability where you can shit out the fusion cores. So I was just running through the Brotherhood base, just shitting out fusion cores, which are like nuclear bombs, because it's the only way you can get through that damn power armor. They fucking won't go down, and I had no ammo left because they're just
it's not the only way. It's not the only way. It's all about the role
you
you
just turned
play.
into a nasty radioactive armoured Easter bunny, leaving little treats for them.
It was just that ability, that perk, like tickled me so much. I was like, "Yeah, fuck it, I'm going to put all my points into that and see how this pans out."
It's funny.
And,
I played pure stealth, and I used to just go round behind them and shoot them in their own fusion core. That was deeply...
I didn't know you could do that.
No, you can use VATS and you can target their fusion core. Bang, bang, boom. That was a delight.
Well, that's the thing about these RPGs, you know, like levels of depth, and it's sometimes
freedom of choice.
Quite difficult to. It's amazing that all those abilities are there, those tactical advantages, but sometimes I think when there's that kind of level of options, you tend to find. I don't know how you guys play, but I always tend to find my way of playing it kind of fairly early on, and then it's just all about just improving myself to make that work the best.
Rob Way, the axe and murder.
I know we've kind of ribbed Rob gently for his axe use, but do you think the current set of RPGs encourage you to do things that you wouldn't normally do? When was the last time you played a game and did something that you weren't the guy with the axe? I mean, everybody, not just Rob. Do you think games allow that? Is there opportunity enough for you to try something new and feel like, oh, maybe I'll be the wizard instead of the axe-wielding dwarf?
I think there's always in a well put together game. I mean, you look at the Bethesda games. I will play every single approach, every single class of character possible, try all the different combinations, and I thoroughly enjoy that. Special mention out of Dishonored as well, though, which just allows you to play an assassin who doesn't. I beat you to it.
Yeah. Oh, that's the one.
Non-lethal, and they leave you options on how to do it and how to approach it. That to me, it's. I would actually put Dishonored down as it's an action RPG. It definitely gets towards the RPG because you really have choice.
Yeah.
What about Thief then? The good one, Deadly Shadows, the last one, not the last No, not the update, the one before. Where you could fire water arrows at candles and stuff. Because you had a lot of choices there.
You arguably did.
You had 2 choices, maybe.
But the thing is, a thief is non-lethal. I just liked the idea of, here you are, you're the master assassin. Don't kill anyone. It can be fun.
Yeah.
But, it's difficult. It's if you look at The Witcher, for example, to be honest, you need to kill a fuckload of monsters. You're not going to get through without killing everything. I do like a game that gives you options.
In that you're kind of like just trying to you do a bit of reading and find out the best way to kill stuff. But back to Dishonored quickly. That's definitely the one that I just arrived at like seconds before you mentioned it, because there was an ability in Dishonored 2 which allowed it's like it's not a mimic, but it basically no, it's not doppelganger. It's basically you can put a little dot on a character, and whatever you do to one character, it has the same effect on them. Domino, that's the one. It's kind
of like a domino effect.
It's funny that. Yeah, why didn't I remember that? But yeah, there was a moment where basically I'd got there was a moment where I dropped domino on 2 guys, and I had one of them like in a kind of headlock, like you can use them as a human shield. And so the guy who I was trying to assassinate shot the guy I had in a human shield, and then basically shot himself.
The trouble is,
that was me going. And that was basically me going, oh my god, yes! It was kind of like, can I do that? I mean, the game obviously lets you do that, but it didn't telegraph it exactly, and it made me feel smart. So it was like, it was a good use of resources in that game, because I do find that game, as much as it is about experimentation, it is also quite a lot about resource management and making the best use of your gear. And I think the second one was quite generous, although I did play that as an absolute psychopath most of it. The other bit in Dishonored that I didn't realise was that there was... Sorry, I'll shut up in a minute. But there was, there's an ability where you can use your blink to sort of tether them, and then when you power it up enough, you can grab hold of an enemy and have them like fly towards you. And I didn't, and I tried it when I was up on a high ledge, and I did it, and they come flying up towards you, and then you can catch them, and then bring them up to that higher ledge, like make them unconscious, then nick all their stuff. And sometimes you can leave them hanging upside down as well. Oh, that was a joy, that game. That really was.
It's not really an RPG, though, is it?
No, but it's it follows what Iain was saying about when was there a moment where a game's mechanics have allowed you to do something that was kind of outside the box.
I did specifically mean an RPG. Will said that you play some of the Bethesda games and you'll play all of the characters.
Yes, very much so.
For Skyrim and Oblivion, I have played a elf archer mainly.
Yeah.
For about probably 400 hours across the 2 of them.
Oh.
And I've loved every minute, but I've no desire to go back and play the other characters.
You see, I, for example, had great fun trying to play non-lethal for a while. So you can go as a mage, specialise in illusion and sneak, and you can you can do entire dungeons, go in, muffle your footsteps as you go through, sneak past every character. If someone does see you, cast a calm spell on them, or a frenzy spell to just make them attack their mates. And you do your very best not to hit anyone. You can kill them, but only indirectly. And it actually makes for quite an interesting challenge. And again, you don't bother with the main quest, because there you've got to kill dragons and shit. Frankly, I find it more fun to start in Skyrim and not actually activate the dragons at all, and just go through exploring the world and stealing shit. Become a master pickpocket, master thief, and never hit a single person. Give it a go one day. You might find it interesting. But that is proper role-playing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Torment is a game with very little combat. I did find myself in a section where I was like, I heard there wasn't a lot of combat in this game. There must be a way around this. And sure enough, there was. But not until actually I'd murdered quite a few things, because that seemed to be what I needed to do. And the actual narrative way of getting around it, I wasn't sure I agreed with. Murder actually seemed preferable. But
I'm like that on my
generally
commute.
in that But generally, that game really does shy away from combat, and I don't mind the combat in the game. It's actually properly turn-based, which I prefer in games of that perspective. I'm not really a fan of the pause and play stuff, which is essentially rounds anyway, but it seems a bit arbitrary, and it's difficult to keep track of like how many blows they're getting versus you, and I find it a little unfair.
I must admit, I like a bit of... I like things like, even on the Dragon Age side of things, when you're trying to control a larger party, if you're just playing as yourself, that's fine, but if you've got a larger party, now and again, just be able to pause it and just say, right, you go over there, you take cover over there, you brew this spell or get this weapon ready or whatever. I do enjoy relatively turn-based combat. I think it's it brings a tacticality to it, which again I enjoy in an RPG.
Yeah. See, that's what threw me with the old Guild Wars stuff, which was the online kind of games. Slightly different type of game, but it was just being in the middle and everyone basically, you're in a group and for some reason they all decide to do a Leroy Jenkins and just run headlong into this. And you're there going, but I'm the heavy hitter. I should be at the front. That's the character I always tend to pick, like the oversized sword-wielding tank bastard. But I also chose a ranger, which was an archer, so shooting from far as a range character, and that was a lot different. You wouldn't think a game like that would change so much, but because you're not being supported by your whole team and basically just getting up in everything's faces, it's quite nice. And you can tame like animals and send them in as well and stuff like that. That was always a lot of fun. So it was just a completely different way of doing it. You're still murdering things, unfortunately, but it was quite nice to change that up. Sorry, Ian, you were going
to... No. It's gone. I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry.
I've always enjoyed just trying the different roles in an RPG. I think it's an important thing. But even if you've got to take something like the Final Fantasy games, you can quite often assign different roles to the different characters. You take some of the early Final Fantasy games, I think it was 3 I had on the Vita, and you could say, right, you're going to be a red mage, you're going to be my heavy fighter, you're going to be my ninja. You can assigning the different roles. I think that's a key part, really. Being able to pick how they behave. I think that's where even Horizon, Far Cry, and to an extent even The Witcher fall down a bit, because really there's only one way they fight. There's subtle underlying flavours of it, but there's only really one way they do it. And The Witcher, I think, is quite an interesting one there. Yes, you can decide which spells he uses and whether, frankly, he wears heavy armour or light armour. But that's about it. But I would still absolutely call it an RPG.
Yeah, well, Witcher really leans into the kind of narrative element of it, and not at all the kind of party-based mechanics that all of the games you mentioned, none of them have that either. I was going to ask, actually, in terms of like when you play an RPG that has those sort of companion options, do you tend to stick to experiment until you find the right mixture, and stick to it, or do you kind of go with what makes sense narratively, or do you chop and change for the sake of it?
Well, personally, I am a great starter of RPGs. I sometimes complete them, but I play them dozens and dozens of times, and I start several times. You take Fallout 4, for an example. I'll play through till about level 20, level 30, and I might stick with one or two companions one time, and then the next playthrough I'll go for a completely different class and pick another companion. I just I like to explore the possibilities more than I like to complete the games, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You like to see how the world works and how the story might change. Yeah.
It's quite interesting. I just mentioned it because it reminded me in Torment. There's a character in it who's, let's just say, a little bit weak, and
so is that as in combat or in personality?
Not in personality necessarily, but in terms of like when you meet a new companion, you look at his character sheet and go, oh cool, yeah, he'll be my tank then. But with this one, it was kind of like, well, they're a bit useless, but if you try and get rid of them, the game kind of emotionally makes you feel like shit. So I couldn't do it. So I basically gimped my character for the sake of the story, and
the devs did it deliberately to guilt you out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fuck yeah, absolutely.
Who's weak, Rob? Who's weak?
But the thing is, like, it's actually been quite rewarding seeing them grow, because obviously they're making lots more XP comparative because the challenge is far greater for them, and so they've become. But there's actually there is a use for them, as the great Tom Hardy might say, in that there's always things to do in combat that aren't actually combat. Like there might be environment bits that they can do, or they could do a bit of healing. You know, you give them a couple of good items and it soon boosts them up.
Oh, you always need to take a thief with you. Always need to take a thief with you. If you can't pick those locks yourself, you will always need someone that can pick a lock.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the way that they've gone. It's like having a hobbit with you, I guess. Like if you were like likening it to the Fellowship, you know, like they were not really in the same league as Gandalf and Strider, really, but they kind of made their way through it. And I think it's cool to kind of put a curveball on it like that, and it's actually made the game a little more challenging in places, and made me think of different ways of approaching problems. But essentially, I'm down a man. Like normally, most people will be playing that with 4 characters, and I'm only playing with 3, really, 3.5.
But don't discount hobbits. So, without hobbits, you'd be going to see a film called The Dwarves. No one would go watch that. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, there are some games that do that. They'll introduce a character later on in the story, and it'll be purely a story-related character, so that you'll either save a village or something, and they'll join your team, and you'll think, oh, cool. Or later on, oh, well, you're like a level 3 character. Why did I not meet you within the first 15 minutes of the game? You know, and then you kind of spend half the time keeping them alive in battles, and then hoping they survive long enough to get the massive chunk of XP. And then often, though, they'll be the one that will learn the big devastating move at the end, which will often be the one that you'd used against the main bad guy. So sometimes it's almost like a dev trick, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that Witcher, that Geralt mostly dates witches, so they're always quite pokey.
Hot witches.
And
date is a loose term. He fraternizes.
At the time of recording, they've just recently announced that Netflix are going to make a show about The Witcher. How do people feel about that?
I hope the witches are as hot.
I'd probably get to the end of it.
Yeah.
Unlike The Witcher.
Yeah, apparently the people who made the game have got nothing to do with it, but the people who have made some of the CG trailers are involved.
Yeah, so, but basically Andrzej Sapkowski is actually getting money out of this deal because he sold the rights to the game to CD Projekt Red because he wanted nothing to do with computer games because they were stupid. There was a really good article, I think it was on Eurogamer, about this. But he sold the rights to them. But at the same time, he was saying, well, at the end of the day, those games have sold me a lot of books. They're now translated into multiple languages, so I've made money out of these games, even though I'd have made an awful lot if I'd said I want 5% of everything. But the Witcher games have now been so big that Andrzej Sapkowski will be getting a commission out of the TV series.
Oh, for sure.
And the TV series will probably sell the games to those who haven't played them. So I think everyone wins. So pretty sweet. Moving things on a little. So I've got a few games from 2016 for some of the big games, and I just want you guys' opinion on whether or not these are RPGs. There is no right answer, except for my opinion, obviously.
Absolutely.
So let's start with Pokemon Go. Marcus, I believe you played?
No.
Yeah, I did play. I might still be occasionally playing that to stop me from going homicidal.
Turn-based combat?
It's not really combat. It's not really. It's a collector game. It's not a RPG. It's a augmented reality. Well, if you turn it off, it's not even that. It's not even an app. It's a mobile game. It's not an RPG.
Okay,
it's like a collect the
because
creatures.
You can't alter stats. You can make minor changes to your avatar, not even really a character because you can't create it. You choose an avatar from options. It's all the basics, isn't it? Anything more on your mobile device would explode. It barely runs on most people's mobile devices anyway. It's a sham of a mockery of a sham wrapped up in a sham.
So,
Mockery.
not
It's
an
based
RPG.
on an RPG. It's based on an RPG, but it is not an RPG.
It made me buy Pokemon Moon though, so it's probably like a glorified advert.
Alright, okay. Moving on. How about
Okay.
The Last Guardian?
Ooh, Rob, you take that one.
No, because your character does not improve throughout the game.
Nor does the AI.
No, the AI certainly doesn't improve. It gets slightly more frustrating, but no, this is good though because we're saying not an that's two that are definitely not an RPG.
I like
so
how
we're doing quite well considering that our original hypothesis was that all games are now RPGs. That's two that definitely are.
I like how Will's done his research on us, like some sort of Terminator.
That's very professional.
Or it could just
Jesus.
so
I'm
happen
glad-
that I've got the internet next to me.
Yes,
Just and I've done a Google of like top games of 2016. But no, that's clearly not the case.
You'll have to edit that bit out.
Okay,
Right, go on.
Just beep it out. Yeah. All right, tricky one here. Dark Souls 3.
Yes, is an RPG. I've not played it.
So,
but,
tell me what
everything I
qualities makes it an RPG.
Well, especially when you
character-
haven't played it.
Well, interestingly, not only does your character improve via like actual items and stat increases, but you as a player actually improve as you play those games.
So the overarching story?
I don't know dick about the story.
I don't think the Dark Souls games really have stories. I think you just got to go in and kill
I
shit.
think you start off in the Netherworld and then you basically just either make your way towards a throne and become a king somewhere along the line. I think that's pretty much what happens.
Could you argue that's the very younger generations of D&D? When I was a much younger kid, my brother and I would make a dungeon that was a room connected to a room. The first room would have a dragon,
I had
the
a
second
dungeon
room would
like
have
that.
1,000 orcs.
Right, sorry.
And it's not, moving on.
But with your brother?
Nobody else would play with me. Is that what Dark Souls is? I've only watched playthroughs of a couple of them.
Yeah,
they
I've
don't
seen a
seem to
few
have a lot of
playthroughs.
lore or mythos or plot or
I would
anything. It's just
personally call it an action game with RPG elements.
Yeah.
They are labelled as like action RPGs. Because they kind of, it's like Diablo, it embraces all the kind of mechanics and not much of the sort of story or characters part of it.
Basically,
I don't think there are dialogue trees in Dark Souls.
Exactly. So for it, I would say you have the ability to choose what kind of fighter / character you are. You can be magey, you can be tank, you can be thief. You've got the classic classes. And for it, you've got the inventory system and you've got the levelling up. But against it, as you say, virtually no dialogue. And as far as I can tell, pretty much no plot. So it's shady. Shady.
You do pretty much just appear in this world, and then you're kind of just wandering around, going from place to place, encountering
Trying not to die.
giant creatures. And lighting bonfires.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The thing is, are we saying it's an RPG if it includes all of the elements, or if it includes some of or most of?
Remind me, what
I think
was
that's the
what
point
was
of the
this?
list.
What was this podcast about?
What is an RPG?
I think it's certainly making the point that nowadays it's not black and white,
Sure.
Yeah.
and I'm keen for more of them. What more do you have, Will?
Final Fantasy 15.
Is a JRPG.
Definitely a JRPG. So, tell me more.
Who's played it?
I'm playing it,
Oh, okay.
struggling to.
Well, let's have your thoughts then, big lad.
I have to say it is. I don't know. It's on rails.
Good horse impression. I
To
like
some,
that. That was
to some
that was
extent. Oh God.
Jesus, what was that?
Possession? I'm not sure.
For those that
I
clearly
spoke
only have
ill
an
of
audio
Final
feed,
Fantasy, and now
the
I think
lights
my
just flashed
younger-
in Marcus's
my
apartment.
younger version of me has probably just arrived from the past to destroy me for besmirching
He
the
just
name of
hasn't-
Final Fantasy.
He hasn't paid his power bill. That's what's
So,
happened.
what would you say in Final Fantasy 15 would qualify it as an RPG? There's a lot of good dialogue.
Final Fantasy 15 has loads of dialogue. Characters kind of grow through the story and through experience and through player actions and combat and everything else.
Do you get much choice in how the characters evolve? So it's not just that they get more powerful. Do you get to choose how they become powerful?
Yes, you can. You've got the option to put them on you've got a sphere grid, so you can choose abilities and how you want each character to play. Mm-hmm. Also how they interact with other characters, whether they're more supportive or whether they'll just go at the other enemies as a tank or whatever. You've got that element, I suppose. You've also got your traditional sort of character garments and weapons and everything else individually. So I guess, I suppose it is still an RPG, even though it's more action. It feels more action based. I think it might be because we've seen the genre change and the lines are blurring with some of them, which is why initially you look at it and go, no, you're just running and hacking and slashing. It's an action game. It's not an RPG anymore. But when you look below the surface, I think it still keeps a lot. Yeah, the combat, it's not a, like D&D, you would take turns, choose your option, which is what the old games did, the turn-based combat.
Arguably, it was a restriction of the systems available at the time. That created the RPGs. Now you've got a lot more processing power. You've got the controllers that allow for a bit more on the console side of things. So I see the.
You've also got whenever people come up with new ideas to perform things, like when Final Fantasy X borrowed heavily from another game system. It was an old RPG called Grandia, which had a time-based system where characters moved along and you chose their options, and sometimes they overlapped because one character's action speed was faster than another. So it wasn't just down the line. So that was the start of a slightly more dynamic element. And if you leveled up a character's speed and vitality, they were quicker at enacting actions. And this was, a long time ago. I would say 15 is, it is an RPG still.
Okay. How about Hitman?
Oh, interesting. I've played through the first couple of episodes of the latest Hitman. It's the first Hitman I've played in a while. It has an inventory, a very limited inventory, but you get to choose your loadout before you go on a mission. You also get to choose how that mission unfolds. Although a lot of that is sort of trial and error and seeing how the world responds to certain things you do. There's no dialogue though to say, but you are very much playing the role of a hitman and getting to approach that situation. It's kind of probably as much of an RPG as maybe something like Thief is, where there's certainly more complex systems, but I'd say it's actually more of a puzzle game.
Well, it certainly wasn't good enough to keep the software house going, so...
I agree with you, Rob, in that it allows you to play the role of a hitman quite well, because it gives you quite a lot of options. There's no clear-cut way. You can run in, guns blazing if you want, and there's a chance you might get the job done and get out. Or you could sneak around and no one would ever know, take out the right people. Take out the right people and, walk in there as a chef, walk out, stay in the kitchen whilst all of the henchmen are running around and you're there pretending to be a chef and then just stroll out at the end of the day.
Feels a bit like Dishonored.
Isn't that what the current usage of RPG usually actually means? You have choices as to how you complete stuff. That's frequent, like Dishonored and Hitman and probably The Last Guardian to some extent. Tomb Raider, it wasn't really called an RPG, but there seem to be, it feels like there's a lot of those that have RPG as the tag.
I think the ones that have
where
RPG...
it's really just, you could do it shooty, you could do it quiet. It doesn't really make it an RPG in a traditional sense, but that seems to be flagged with it.
I think there's elements of that, but I think the must-have item on the action RPGs is the levelling up. I would say, so in Dishonored... you can pick which magic skills you take or how you buff your fighting. In Far Cry, you can pick that selection. And I think so long as you can, and I'm assuming in Horizon as well, you can decide whether she gets better with a bow or better at hacking dinosaurs and that sort of thing.
You can buy better stuff.
Right.
But that's skill... isn't that skill points? It's skill trees and stuff.
Oh, no, you're right. There is a whole skill tree as well where you can...
I think it's always
choose... Yeah, you can power up like certain abilities. So it's very Far Cry,
Yeah.
like in that respect. It's the same sort of
So
thing.
they chuck in a skill tree, and off the back of that, I think pretty much every time they'll call it an RPG.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like it sort of ticks those boxes. When I see that sort of stuff in a game, I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. That sort of, scratches that itch, that I normally feel like that kind of comfort feeling when I do sit down and play an RPG. It's like, oh yeah, it's got that in it. Brilliant. And that was kind of where the initial argument came from, was like, isn't it everything? But yeah, Hitman, in terms of like progression, you basically, because of the way they divvied that game up, you would basically be able to run the same mission again, and you would do challenges throughout each level. You could do as many as you could fit into that attempt, and by sort of doing those challenges, you would unlock new places where you could start the mission from next time. So it's kind of like it's really just in service of replayability, really, rather than actually progressing. So it really isn't an RPG. It's a very nicely presented puzzle game, if you ask me.
Okay, and the final one I'm going to go for, which we have already mentioned and wasn't from 2016, would be the Diablo games, Diablo 3, for example.
Right, yeah, I did mention that in reference when we were talking about Dark Souls, but yeah, again, I think they're kind of just, it's like become a subgenre like action RPG, and they are very good. Also, Torchlight is a game that had an incredible 6-player mode, which basically was like, if you don't have epilepsy, then
you will by the end.
Yeah, basically, because you just can't. When you've got 6 players running about with all their abilities triggering off, you literally just can't see anything.
It is particle effects bukkake, is what it is. It's just
never
just
Google
horrific.
That. Never Google that.
No, listener, do not.
I was like starting to wig out, I think, playing it. I'm like,
yeah, it's just, you don't know where stuff is. It's just, look at all the pretties. It was hilarious. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, just because you can do a thing, maybe you shouldn't do it.
Just like bukkake, yeah.
Yeah.
Might want to edit all of that out. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's alright.
Make an interesting Easter egg.
Salty.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was a game not related to anything you've said in the last couple of minutes, but
just moving
there
on
was
to
another
Marcus's
online.
mind.
Chuck it in there.
No, there's another MMORPG that I played. It was a Korean one, and it was called Iain, and it tried to take off and take Dragon. No, I've forgotten the game I was playing for 3 years now. Guild Wars. It tried to take Guild Wars' crown, basically, as the free-to-play massive MMORPG, where you basically played a character, and I'm not sure whether you were actually a fallen angel, but you unlocked wings after, I think, 3 levels, and you could fly, and you joined up with loads of other people. I remember when I first took part in one of the first sort of boss battles, it was against Golem, and I swear I looked at the count of people that were on there, and it was 1,500 and rising, 1,500 people rising in one battle, and it was just people swarming. It was like pigeons at Trafalgar Square in the 90s. It was it was just I literally
what
just
was
sat
your
on
frame
this
rate
rock.
like for that?
Non-existent. I actually had to stop, land on a rock, and watch this thing happen. It was like a swarm from World War Z. It was just like, it was ridiculous. I just thought to myself, I just don't know what I'm doing with this game anymore. What is the point of all the grindy missions I've done? When all the pinnacle of that is to basically fly at a boss with anything from hundreds to thousands of people, and just it dies. It stood no chance. It looked cool in the trailers, but at that point I was out. Because I just thought, I just don't feel anything towards this. And that brings me on to another question. What do you guys think about the whole online multiplayer thing? Small numbers? Big numbers? Do you prefer larger numbers? Do you prefer just keeping it with your friends against the world?
I personally don't get the opportunity.
Yeah.
So when I do play online, I play with strangers, just because having 2 young kids, I only get random snatches of time to play games. never enough time to organise actual friends, if I had some, to play with. So, I mean, my favourite game in the world at the moment, or at least maybe not favourite, but my most played game at the moment is Overwatch. Certainly for an online game, just because I can hop in. I don't do competitive, just playing the arcade games, and I've found a couple of like-minded people. If they're online, I'll join them. Otherwise, just go in. I don't care. It's annoying when you're basically on a team of complete twats, so you get a couple of trolls. But I would love to play with mates on that sort of thing, but I just don't have time.
Yeah.
Are you a troll, Rob?
And what? I was just going to ask you what role you played in Overwatch.
Tangle support. I never go for DPS. I let the youngsters with the reflexes do those things. No, I'll just stand there with my big fuck off shield and say, stand behind it and shoot. And you know what they'll do?
Yeah.
They'll leap through straight into the line of fire, and I'll be standing there going, well, I've got a shield.
Yeah. Oh, you should have moved forward with me.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know. Actually, in Overwatch, I have started playing Tracer, just because she's brilliant fun. So it's not about trying to do a teamwork thing with her. It's just going in and annoying the other team, flanking them, coming round, picking them off. The best tips I've read were basically behave like a mosquito. Annoy them with your buzzing. You're not necessarily trying to kill them. You're just trying to get some blood out of them and distract them from what's going on. And that to me, is a fun way to play.
I've never played Overwatch. I was tempted to give it a go.
Oh, they keep doing 3 weekends.
It looks a lot of fun. Everyone's been talking about it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Adam plays it a lot. Adam, friend of the show. It's definitely his. He's in a similar situation to you, Will, and he has a limited gaming time. So Overwatch lets him pop in for half an hour if he's got it free and have a great time.
That's it. Yeah. Although I've got it on PC and on PlayStation, and you know what? On the PlayStation, I couldn't recommend it unless you're playing with friends because there's no communication. On PC, you can do some text chat and try and organise stuff, even if people aren't mic'd up. On PlayStation, the only people that are mic'd up are 10-year-old American children, and you want to mute them instantly. Never have I managed to talk tactics with a team on the PlayStation, but on the PC, people will chat. People are generally friendly, and you can mute the ones that are tossers. So if you've got reasonably decent, because I don't think it's high power. If you've got reasonably decent rig, play it on PC. Absolutely. Only play it on PlayStation if, unlike me, you have A, friends and B, time.
Go on.
Rob, was your question specifically MMORPGs or playing with people online in a...
I don't think...
Oh, it's mine. But it was just in
was
general.
Mark's
Like, hell, even co-op, to be honest, which I think is... which brings up another point that I sorely miss from games. I'm kind of steering it a little bit away from the RPG thing. We'll bring it back after. But I think that one genre that's kind of gone is the 2-player local co-op. A lot of games. I just miss the idea of having a mate on a sofa.
Borderlands is good
enjoying
for that.
the same game.
Borderlands is cracking for that.
I really do miss that.
Almost an RPG.
We're playing through the pre-sequel at the moment, Ian and I, and Adam, friend of the show, and Rada's friend of the show. We're doing that kind of like once a week. And it's pretty good. It's pretty freewheeling. I find it a game, especially when there's 4 of you, and I don't know if there's difficulty settings in it or anything, but I find it... you set the difficulty by the difficulty of the quest, I think, don't you? So, I find it fairly frictionless, although it's... I don't know. Sometimes there have been moments where I felt like we've all been locked in, it's wicked, but it's quite often, someone's trailing behind a little and someone's running ahead, and it can be a little difficult sometimes to get that proper synergy going. And I think that's mostly because of the stakes. The stakes aren't high enough.
No, I absolutely agree with you. But I think because one of my problems with RPGs a lot of the time, if you play them as they are meant to be played, is you kind of lose the wonder of the world because you go somewhere, there's somebody with a question mark over their head, you go up to them and they tell you to go here. And a lot of people will just go from question mark to 20 flibbles they have to kill back to guy with exclamation mark.
Yeah.
And that's okay, or the other way around with the marks. And that's okay, but I prefer having to figure stuff out with other human beings. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? So you could argue that stuff like The Rising Storms or Killing Floor 2, where there's some kind of how are we going to get through this thing together, what are we going to do, and that requires communication,
And Left 4 Dead.
Yeah, absolutely Left 4 Dead.
Oh, Left 4 Dead was brilliant.
They have a great sense of camaraderie, I think. And I think...
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I think I played WoW with you, Bobby, and others when it was released, and I subsequently went on to play with a number of guilds in WoW. I was never an endgame person, but I liked hooking up with other guildmates and going and doing a dungeon, or if they were a younger level, going and helping them out with stuff. And that, especially with the dungeons, we would slot into roles and discuss the roles that we were going to be, and that felt like a good defining roles and what was going to do stuff thing.
Can I ask, were you forced to have those conversations and to define those roles because otherwise you wouldn't be able to complete it? Was it just challenging enough that if you all just went tank or all just went heal or all just went DPS, you wouldn't be able to do it? Did you actually, would you fail?
I think it was back in the good old days of trial and error. You would go to the dead mines the first time and you'd go, oh right, well let's go over here and see what's over here, and you'd all get wiped. And then you'd have to go back, and you could go and do the same stuff again, but it wasn't Einstein, somebody else, same thing, insanity. You'd have a bit of a chat about, right, okay, how are we going to do that? And you'd go forward and try the new tactic, and if that worked, great. You waltz into the next room using the same tactic, get wiped, and have to do it all again.
Yeah.
A lot of games at the moment want to get you through it quickly. And that's one of my biggest bugbears at the moment is... the games are like 8 and 10 hours because they really help you through it. Which is, maybe I need to play Dead Souls, which is
Dark
something
Souls.
that will Souls. That would certainly destroy me. Marcus, you mentioned about 2-player co-op games. Dead Space 3.
Yeah.
Really, really good. If you can find one other to play that with, it's great for co-op. Really
you
dark.
can do that. It's not the best Dead Space game, but it's because of that co-op mode, because that's what it was. I think if you played it that way, it kind of was the best Dead Space game. I don't think it was really a Dead Space game, though. It was more like a Gears of War, I thought. I played all of the Gears of War. Well, not I say all. I played the first 3 Gears of War in co-op, and they were brilliant. Like, just for sheer, like, camaraderie and a few cool little... there were a few little quirks in those games where like there'd be like a section where like you had to stay in the light, so one of you would have to be up on a thing controlling a spotlight, letting your mate get through an area that was basically full of Grizzlies.
Me and Suze loved that level. Yeah, we were playing that together actually. I think we've kind of dropped off a bit, but to the point where we were going to a beer festival and we were jokingly going through Admiral's Park and it was bit dark and we were like hopping from streetlight to streetlight, just joking about the fact that it was like, don't let them get you.
Could I make another point about online stuff? I've played Lord of the Rings Online for 10 years now. I despise the movies with an absolute vengeance. What a load of tedious guff.
Not as bad as the books.
For any massive fan. Yeah, but I understand why people like it, and that's okay. However, the weird thing for me is, as much as I despise the books, I still gave that a go, and I've probably got thousands of hours in that, and I'm still playing it at the moment. You get to top level, go back and do it all again. I'm not interested in the end game, such as it is. I'm not interested in massive group dungeons. What I like about it is the world. It feels like a proper, real world. Yes, there are people with question marks, and yes, there are other stuff, but I think specifically because I've always played on RP role-playing servers, you get this... Even in WoW, I played on an RP server. To go into Stormwind in WoW and have people just gathering for a festival, where the festival is there'll be people doing a silly dance, or people having sword fights, or people... And it's their own thing, it's not the game. And I like that kind of dynamic...
I loved that in Guild Wars, it was the same
dynamic
thing.
Stuff that would just happen.
Yeah.
So...
That's pushing it back to the RPG conversation, which is nice.
Yeah,
we've wandered away from that, but
but I think the reason that I love that is it feels like a real world. It feels like proper fantasy, not the way WoW went with its spaceships and all turtles and pandas and crap.
Yeah.
That's fine for that. But it started to become disjointed, in my mind. Lord of the Rings Online is fully fantasy. There's no weird stuff. It's just proper orcs, monsters, wizards and shit. And with the RP stuff, it always feels like it's real and not just a question marks and exclamation marks.
Talking of Lord of the Rings, Shadow of Mordor, RPG or not?
I was just thinking that.
Action one, surely.
Yeah, it's got to be an action.
Although
Action RPG.
it's got skill trees, hasn't it?
It has, but I tell you what, if you play the game properly, you've filled that skill tree entirely, so it's just a matter of choosing the order.
Hasn't that even got dialogue choices in it?
Minimal. I don't know, it's got dialogue but not choices.
Do
And
you want this
inventory's
mission?
non-existent.
Yes, no.
Yeah.
I suppose the
It's a
revenge
no.
system, in there gives it a little bit
The
of
Nemesis system, yeah, that was
yeah,
beautiful.
that's Nemesis, not revenge. Yeah, it gives it a little bit of almost worldly realism.
It makes it
Because-
dynamic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because someone will kill you and they'll laugh at you next time they meet you. So I remember Rob was talking about it before. Or you
that
take
game
them
has
out.
got. Yeah, that game has got the best combat ever in it. I mean, my God, I would be in situations like that where, I mean, I would be by the skin of my teeth. I'd be in a pitched battle with like about 100 orcs for about like, I don't know, half an hour at least. Like, and it would just and then they'd come like these guys would come along and they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get you back for that. And it was just like, oh, that was fantastic. That was my game of the year that it came out.
Yeah.
So if people are calling that an RPG, surely then the Batmans are RPGs as well. Then
Arguably,
Yeah.
absolutely, because it's the same game. It's another skin, isn't it?
that's where I was going. Yeah,
Except
yeah,
for the Batmobile, which was shit. I did not like the
Oh, I
last Batman game.
really like that. I thought that was great.
I bet you like driving games.
I despise them. Absolutely despise them.
Oh well, that's me wrong for a change.
Despise them
didn't
with a
really-
vengeance.
It didn't really feel like much of a driving game. It was more like you were just flying a gun around, basically. Yeah, I didn't. I think the problem with that is that it seemed a bit of a waste of a city where it could have really felt like you were driving. It didn't really feel like you were driving.
Yeah.
You're
I really-
rushing from one point to another to shoot this. Rush
It was
the
just
next
a big
point,
bloody
shoot
thing
that.
that was propelling you a bit faster, I think.
I certainly didn't want to do the side missions, quests, whatever they were called, but I enjoyed the main story.
I think I finished Asylum and I finished City, but I never finished Night. I've still got it in a drawer somewhere. I might pick it up again one day when I have a dry spell, but nah, probably not.
To be honest, that was a bit of a grind to actually finish because you had to do all of the Riddler trophies to get the proper ending, and I never did that either. But I did get finish all the actual story missions.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. That was good.
Yeah. It's despite the dodgy PC port. But
Yeah, only for you though.
yeah. Well, just because I just had the recommended amount. Well, I didn't have the recommended amount of RAM basically, but you know, you need
So it
12
is.
gig of RAM to play games. Apparently,
Yarp.
Clearly.
crazy.
Right, is this a good
Yeah,
point to
all right.
wrap up?
I think so. I think we've hit all the bases. I'm glad we got to the MMO bit because I know Ian's particularly fond of those. Although I think, well, I certainly spent my fair share of time with Warcraft.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I'm happy to leave it there.
Okay.
Nice.
This has been the Not Playing podcast in partnership with notlistening.co.uk, where you can also hear myself, Marcus and Ian talk about movies and TV on the Not Watching podcast, and Adam, Ash and Will talk about all manner of funny things on the Not Listening podcast. You can email us at notplayingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet at or follow us on Twitter at notplayingpod. You can find the show notes for this show at notlistening.co.uk, and if you're listening to us on iTunes, then please do give us a review. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for listening. See ya.
To agree 'cause I suck. I suck